In the vast golden hall of the Eternal Palace, where crystal chandeliers floated like captured stars, casting warm light across endless marble floors, Solana stood trembling before Aether, his commanding presence filling the entire chamber with undeniable power. Her heart raced with fragile hope that this bonding ceremony might finally lift her from years of silence and invisibility. Then, without warning, the familiar warmth betrayed her as bright crimson blood began to trickle steadily from her nose, staining the pure white silk of her ceremonial gown in a vivid, shocking trail. Gasps rippled through the assembled nobles like a dark wave crashing across the room. Aether's golden eyes narrowed with visible disgust, and his deep voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. This Omega is too fragile, her blood flows too freely. She is unworthy of standing beside a king. I reject her completely as my mate. Which country are you listening from? Please comment below. I'd love to know how far this story reaches. Shame crashed over Solana like a freezing wave as those cruel words echoed through the grand hall and deep into her soul. Invisible, unworthy, broken, those labels burned into her heart as she turned and fled the ceremony. Her footsteps desperate against the cold stone floors, while mocking whispers from the courtiers chased her down the long, echoing corridors. Tears blurred her vision as she ran deeper into the shadows of the palace, seeking any place where she could disappear once more. How could the man the bond had chosen for her cast her aside, so publicly, so coldly, in front of the entire court? Her chest tightened with familiar pain, the weight of being seen only as weakness pressing down harder than ever before. Yet somewhere beneath the heartbreak, a quiet, ancient whisper stirred in her, blood promising that perhaps her story was only beginning. In the dim, flickering light of the lower palace halls, where the grand chandeliers of the upper floors never reached, Solana moved like a ghost through the shadows. Days had blurred into weeks since that devastating rejection at the bonding ceremony, and she had retreated back into the only world she truly knew, the world of invisibility. Every morning before the first light touched the high towers, she rose from her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, her body already aching with the weight of another endless day. She tied her simple gray apron around her waist and slipped quietly into the vast kitchens where the air hung heavy with the scent of baking bread and simmering stews. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she scrubbed the stone floors on her knees. The rough brush moved back and forth in rhythmic motions while soap suds mixed with the dirt of countless footsteps. No one spoke to her directly. The beta servants and lower guards passed by as if she were part of the furniture, a small, insignificant Omega whose presence barely registered. Occasionally a sharp comment would drift her way, another mark of her fragility, they would say, remembering how her blood had ruined the perfect white gown and brought shame upon the ceremony. Solana kept her head down, her long dark hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. Inside, her thoughts swirled like storm clouds. Why was she born this way? Why did her body betray her with those sudden nosebleeds that painted her as weak and broken? The memory of the king's cold rejection flashed through her mind again, his powerful voice declaring her unworthy in front of the entire court. The way his golden eyes had looked at her, not with the warmth of a destined bond, but with pure disappointment. It still stung deeply, cutting into the quiet corners of her heart where hope had once tried to bloom. She felt so small, so invisible, as if the grand palace itself had swallowed her whole, and no one would ever notice if she simply faded away completely. Yet in the quiet moments between tasks, small sparks of humanity reached her. Lila, another Omega who worked in the laundry rooms, would sometimes slip her an extra piece of warm bread or a kind smile when no one was looking. "We are not nothing, Solana," Lila had whispered once during a stolen moment in the herb garden, their hands brushing briefly in solidarity. "There are more of us than they realize, and one day our stories will matter." Those words lingered in Solana's mind like a fragile candle in the darkness, reminding her that she was not entirely alone, even if the world treated her as such. As the day wore on, Solana moved from the kitchens to the long corridors, carrying heavy buckets of water, her arms burning with effort. The palace above thrummed with the life of nobles and powerful alphas making decisions that shaped kingdoms, while she remained down here in the underbelly, cleaning away the evidence of their feasts and gatherings. She wiped down the wooden tables where servants ate their meals, listening to the distant echoes of laughter and music from the upper halls. Her inner voice questioned everything. Was this truly all she was meant for? Scrubbing and serving while her heart carried the heavy burden of a rejected bond. A sudden sharp pain pierced her thoughts as another memory surfaced from her childhood. She remembered being only 12 years old when the nosebleeds first became frequent. Her mother had pulled her into a hidden corner, pressing a cloth to her face with urgent fear in her eyes. "Never let them see this, Solana," her mother had whispered. "They will call you cursed or weak, and in this world weakness is a death sentence for omegas like us." That lesson had been carved into her soul, forcing her to hide every sign of her difference, every drop of blood that flowed so mysteriously. Now, years later, in the cold reality of the palace, those words felt truer than ever. Solana finished her tasks as the evening lanterns were lit, casting long dancing shadows along the stone walls. She retreated to a small alcove near the storage rooms, where she often found a few moments of solitude. Sitting with her back against the cool wall, she closed her eyes and let the exhaustion wash over her. The bond she had felt that day in the ceremony still hummed faintly in her chest, a distant reminder of Aether, whose presence she avoided at all costs. Her fingers traced the edge of her apron absent-mindedly when a familiar warmth began to build behind her nose. Not again, she thought with quiet dread. She reached quickly for a small white cloth she kept hidden in her pocket, pressing it gently to her face as the first drops of crimson appeared. In the quiet solitude of the alcove, Solana held her breath, wondering what fresh mark of shame this latest nosebleed would bring. Footsteps echoed suddenly from the corridor, growing closer and more purposeful than the usual servant traffic. Solana's heart jumped as she quickly hid the cloth, her mind racing with fear of being discovered once more. In the cramped confines of her tiny chamber, tucked far away in the deepest shadows of the lower palace halls, Solana finally allowed her racing heart to slow as she bolted the simple wooden door behind her with shaking hands. The footsteps from the corridor had faded into distant echoes, leaving her alone once more in this small space that served as her only refuge from the world's harsh judgments. A single flickering candle on the wooden stool cast a warm golden glow across the rough stone walls, illuminating the narrow cot with its thin blanket, the worn shelf holding a few cherished books, scavenged from discarded piles, and the small basin of water she used for washing after long days of labor. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the dried herbs she had secretly gathered in the palace gardens to bring a touch of beauty and calm to her otherwise invisible life. She sank down onto the edge of the cot, her legs trembling from the close call, her hands still clutching the small white cloth stained with the fresh crimson from her recent nosebleed that had started so unexpectedly in the alcove. As she unfolded the cloth carefully under the soft candlelight, something extraordinary and breathtaking began to unfold before her wide, astonished eyes. The blood drops, which should have simply dried into ugly, meaningless stains, started to move with a life of their own, rearranging themselves across the white fabric in elegant flowing lines that danced like living ink. They shimmered and glowed with a soft, ethereal golden light, forming perfect script in an ancient language that felt strangely familiar to her heart, as if it had been waiting inside her all along, whispering secrets from a forgotten time. Solana gasped softly, her breath catching in her throat as the words took shape, revealing a detailed and precise prophecy that sent chills down her spine. It spoke of a coordinated theft in the royal treasury planned for the night of the next full moon, when the guards would be lured away by a false alarm at the eastern gates. Specific names of traitorous merchants hidden among the court suppliers, the exact amount of gold and jewels to be stolen, the secret underground passage they would use, and even the precise moment the theft would begin, all laid out in beautiful glowing letters that pulsed with undeniable truth and power. Her mind spun wildly with shock and disbelief, her inner thoughts tumbling like a stormy sea crashing against the shores of her long-held self-doubt. "This cannot be real," she whispered to herself, her voice a mix of awe and trembling fear echoing softly in the quiet chamber. For years the nosebleeds had been her curse, the very reason Aether had rejected her so publicly and coldly, calling her fragile and unworthy in front of the entire court with his powerful voice that still haunted her dreams. She had hidden them, treated them as marks of shame, believing they made her even more invisible and broken in a world that valued strength and perfect bloodlines above all else. Yet here in the quiet solitude of her chamber, her own blood was not staining but speaking, writing prophecies with a precision and beauty that surpassed anything the royal seers had ever produced or dreamed of. How is this possible? Could something the world dismissed as weakness actually be a hidden gift, a sacred power flowing through her veins like an ancient river of destiny, carrying the voice of the future itself? Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the glowing script as she traced the words with a trembling finger, feeling a spark of something new and empowering ignite deep within her soul for the first time in years. The prophecy felt so real, so certain, as if the universe itself had chosen her blood as its ink to reveal truths that could change the course of the kingdom and perhaps even her own fate. A quiet sense of wonder mixed with the fear, reminding her that perhaps she was not as powerless as everyone, including herself, had believed for so long. But the fear was stronger, rooted deeply in years of trauma and oppression, the memory of her mother's urgent warnings flashing briefly in her mind like a painful echo from the past. "Never let them see Solana," her mother had said long ago, pressing a cloth to her young face with desperate eyes. "They will use you or destroy you, and Omegas like us have no voice in this world of Alphas." The rejection at the bonding ceremony replayed in her thoughts the way the king's golden eyes had filled with disgust instead of the warmth she had hoped for the bond to bring. It had shattered her, leaving her to believe she was destined for nothing but silence and shadows. Yet as the script continued to glow softly on the cloth, Solana felt a shift inside her, a gentle but firm push toward courage. She could not ignore this gift, no matter how terrifying it seemed. This was her blood, writing the prophecy warning of danger to the very treasury the king guarded so fiercely. Part of her wanted to run to the upper halls, to show someone, to prove that she was more than the fragile Omega they saw. But doubt held her back, the risk of being laughed at, or worse, accused of witchcraft, too great in her mind. No, she must protect this secret until she understood it better, until she could trust what it meant for her life. With careful and reverent hands, Solana folded the cloth, neatly tucking it beneath her thin mattress, where no one would think to look, hiding the glowing prophecy from prying eyes. Her fingers lingered for a moment on the fabric, feeling the last traces of warmth from the magic within. But even as she did so, another familiar warmth began to build behind her nose, signaling yet another nosebleed, this one gentler but insistent. She reached quickly for another scrap of white cloth from her shelf, pressing it to her face, just in time as the drops fell. When she pulled it away, the blood once again began to shift and rearrange, forming a second, shorter prophecy, this one speaking of a small but significant event in the palace kitchens that would affect the evening meal for the nobles. Her inner voice questioned everything in a rush of emotion. Could this truly be real, or was she losing her mind in the isolation of her invisible existence? The gift felt empowering yet terrifying, a double-edged sword in a world that had taught her to stay silent and unseen at all costs. She hid the second cloth as well, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread, wondering what this meant for her future and the kingdom she served so quietly. Just as she finished hiding the cloths, a soft but insistent knock sounded at her chamber door, making her freeze in place, her body tensing with sudden alarm. Her heart leaped into her throat as a muffled voice called out from the other side, a voice she recognized as one of the beta servants, but with an urgency that sent a wave of fear through her. "Solana, the head cook, is calling for you in the kitchens right now. There is trouble brewing, and you are needed immediately." The words hung in the air like a warning as Solana wondered if somehow her secret had already been discovered, or if this was the beginning of the prophecy coming to life in ways she could not yet imagine. In the quiet solitude of her tiny chamber, after the long evening in the kitchen, Solana sat on the edge of her narrow cot, pulling her thin blanket tightly around her shoulders. The single candle flickered softly, casting warm golden light and dancing shadows across the rough stone walls. The palace above continued its distant celebrations while she remained here in the depths, feeling more invisible than ever. Tonight the weight of her newly discovered gift pressed heavily upon her heart, and the memories she had tried so hard to bury rose up like dark, inescapable waves, pulling her deep into the past. She closed her eyes, and the first vivid memory unfolded with painful clarity. She saw herself as a frightened 8-year-old child in their modest village home. A sudden nosebleed had stained the dinner table, and her mother had reacted with pure terror rather than comfort. Solana remembered the urgent press of cloth against her face, and her mother's trembling voice filled with fear. "Hide it, my daughter, never let them see your blood. In this world, Omegas who bleed strangely are called cursed or weak, and the Alphas will punish you severely. We survive only by staying silent and invisible." That night her mother kept her hidden from neighbors, teaching her the painful art of concealment, while warning her repeatedly of the dangers that waited for those who revealed any weakness. The memory shifted to her teenage years when the nosebleeds grew more frequent and harder to control. One winter evening, while working for a beta merchant connected to the palace, her blood had accidentally stained a white tablecloth. The man had reacted with cold fury, dragging her before her mother and demanding answers. Her mother had begged on her knees, claiming it was mere fragility, while secretly squeezing Solana's hand in desperate warning. Later that night, in the safety of their home, her mother had held her close with tears streaming down her face, yet her words remained firm and unyielding. "You must promise me, Solana, to stay silent no matter what. Your differences will only bring pain and destruction. The world of Alphas values perfect strength, and we Omegas have no voice unless we remain unseen." Those words had carved themselves into Solana's soul, shaping her into the quiet shadow she had become. But the most devastating memory of all came flooding back with crushing force the day of the bonding ceremony 2 years earlier. The grand hall had glowed with magnificent light ether, standing tall and powerful like a force of nature itself. Solana had felt the strong pull of the destined bond, her heart filled with fragile hope that someone might finally see her true worth. Then, without warning, the nosebleed had begun, staining her pure white gown in front of the entire court. The gasps and whispers had spread like poison as the king's golden eyes filled with visible disgust. His deep, commanding voice had echoed through the hall, declaring her too fragile and unworthy, casting her aside publicly as his potential mate. The humiliation had shattered her completely. She remembered fleeing through the long marble corridors, tears mixing with blood, while courtiers whispered cruelly behind her back. That single moment had confirmed every warning her mother had ever given her, crushing her last remaining hope and reinforcing her belief that she must remain invisible forever. As these painful memories washed over her in waves, Solana felt hot tears tracing down her cheeks. Her inner thoughts swirled with deep emotion and lingering fear. Why had fate burdened her with this mysterious power in her blood if the world would only see it as weakness? The glowing prophecies hidden beneath her mattress represented both incredible possibility and terrifying danger. She questioned everything in silent desperation, wondering if revealing her gift would lead to salvation or simply another devastating rejection. The trauma ran so deep that even now, with evidence of her hidden talent, she resolved to keep it secret, to stay safely within the shadows where she had learned to survive. No matter how strongly the ancient call of her blood whispered to her, she would not risk stepping into the light only to be cast out again. Just as she wiped the tears from her face and began to steady her breathing, the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the corridor outside her door. They were heavy and deliberate, far different from the usual servant movements, growing steadily closer in the dead of night. Solana froze her heart, leaping into her throat as a wave of fresh fear washed over her, wondering who could be approaching her chamber at this late hour, and whether her precious secret had somehow already been discovered. In the shadowed heart of the lower palace, where flickering lanterns cast long, uneasy patterns across the stone corridors, Solana moved through her morning duties with a quiet determination that masked the storm raging inside her soul. The memory of her hidden prophecies still burned brightly in her mind, those glowing words of warning about the treasury theft that now felt like a living weight pressing against her chest. As she carried a heavy tray of fresh linens toward the upper servant passages, the familiar warmth built suddenly behind her nose without any warning at all. She slipped quickly into a narrow alcove, pressing a clean white cloth to her face, just as the crimson drops fell freely. This time the blood did not merely stain, it moved with that same ethereal purpose, rearranging into elegant script that glowed softly in the dim light, revealing a second prophecy, even more detailed and urgent than the first. It spoke of the same coordinated theft planned for the full moon night, but now with vivid new layers. The exact time the guards would be distracted by a false fire alarm at the eastern gates, the names of 2 high-ranking merchants who had bribed insiders, and the precise underground passage they would used to slip away with chests of gold and ancient jewels that held the kingdom's stability. Solana's heart pounded wildly as she read the words, her inner thoughts swirling with a powerful mix of awe and paralyzing fear. This was no coincidence. Her blood was speaking again, confirming the first prophecy and urging her to act, yet the trauma of her past screamed at her to stay silent, to remain the invisible Omega who had learned the hard way that stepping forward only brought rejection and pain. How could she, a rejected, fragile girl from the lower halls, dare to interfere in the affairs of Aether, who had cast her aside so coldly? Yet deep within her a new voice rose, stronger than before, whispering that her gift was not a curse, but a sacred responsibility, a chance to protect the very kingdom that had made her feel so small and unworthy. The empowering pull of that realization stirred something transformative in her soul, making her feel seen for the first time by destiny itself, even if no one else yet knew it. She folded the cloth with trembling reverence, tucking it securely into the pocket of her apron, her mind racing through the risks and the faint hope that this could matter. The palace above hummed with its usual grandeur, but Solana knew from overheard whispers among the servants that tensions were rising in the royal war room, where Aether himself was meeting with his advisors. Though she could not see it, she imagined the scene vividly, the grand chamber lined with ancient maps and flickering torches, the king standing tall and commanding at the head of a heavy oak table, his golden eyes narrowed with focused intensity as reports of potential threats to the treasury poured in from loyal scouts. His deep voice cut through the air like tempered steel, questioning every detail, demanding to know how such vulnerabilities could exist in his carefully guarded realm. The advisors shifted uneasily under his gaze, speaking of whispers from the merchant guilds and unusual movements near the eastern gates, but none could pinpoint the full danger that Solana's blood had already revealed in perfect prophetic script. The bond between them, though rejected and distant, still hummed faintly in her chest, pulling her thoughts toward him in a way that both terrified and compelled her, making her wonder if her gift was somehow tied to the very man who had broken her heart in that grand hall. Solana's internal struggle deepened with every step she took back toward the kitchens, her hands clenching around the tray as she weighed the choice before her. To act meant risking everything, exposing herself to the same scorn that had defined her life, yet to stay silent meant allowing harm to come to the kingdom, and perhaps even to the king himself. The empowering journey she felt stirring inside her, from invisible servant to bearer of truth, pushed her forward, reminding her that her blood carried the voice of the voiceless, and that true strength was not in perfect bloodlines, but in the courage to speak when it mattered most. She spotted Lila, her trusted Omega friend, from the laundry rooms near the herb storage area, and in a moment of quiet resolve Solana pulled her Aside into the shadowed corner, their eyes meeting with the silent understanding only those who had lived unseen could share. Lila, her hands still dusted with soap from her own labors, looked at Solana with gentle concern as they whispered hurriedly, "I have something important, something that could save us all." Solana said, her voice soft but steady with newfound purpose as she slipped the folded cloth into Lila's palm. "This is no ordinary stain, it is a warning, a prophecy about the treasury theft on the full moon night. Please get this to someone who can act without revealing where it came from. I trust you because we are the ones who have always been invisible, and now our time to protect what matters has come." Lila's eyes widened with a mix of shock and quiet admiration, her fingers closing around the cloth as she nodded firmly. "I will do it, Solana, for you, and for all of us who have been silenced too long. You are braver than you know." The emotional exchange lingered between them, a small but powerful bond of chosen family, strengthening Solana's resolve even as fear still whispered at the edges of her mind. As Lila hurried away to fulfill the task, Solana returned to her duties, her heart racing with cinematic tension that filled the air like the gathering storm clouds outside the palace windows. The full moon was only days away, and she could almost feel the shadows of the coming theft closing. In the false alarm being prepared, the bribed guards shifting uneasily, the merchants plotting in hidden corners. She moved through the kitchens with mechanical grace, chopping vegetables and stirring pots, while her inner thoughts soared with a blend of hope and dread, wondering if her small act would reach the war room in time, if Aether would heed the mysterious warning or dismiss it as he had once dismissed her. The palace seemed to hold its breath, the distant sounds of the king's commanding voice echoing faintly from above as he demanded more vigilance from his advisors, the weight of his responsibility pressing down upon him in ways Solana could sense through the faint hum of their rejected bond. She paused for a moment near a high window, gazing out at the sprawling kingdom below her, blood singing softly with the knowledge that she had taken the first step toward changing everything, even if it meant facing the very man who had once called her unworthy. Yet as the day wore on and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, a new wave of unease settled over the lower halls. Servants whispered of increased guard movements and a sudden alert from the eastern gates that matched the prophecies' details too closely for comfort. Solana's pulse quickened as she realized the theft's opening moves were beginning right now, the distraction unfolding exactly as her blood had foretold. She slipped toward a quiet vantage point near the service stairs, her eyes scanning for any sign that Lila had succeeded, while the tension built like a gathering storm ready to break. In that moment of cinematic urgency, with the palace stirring into action around her, Solana wondered if her gift would be enough to turn the tide, or if the shadows of her past trauma would pull her back into silence just as the danger reached its peak. In the tense hush that fell over the palace as night deepened and the full moon hung like a watchful silver sentinel in the velvet sky, the lower halls thrummed with an undercurrent of urgency that Solana could feel in every hurried footstep and whispered exchange among the servants. She had slipped into a shadowed alcove near the grand staircase that led to the upper levels, her body pressed against the cool stone wall, heart hammering like a caged bird desperate for release. From her hidden vantage, she watched the cinematic unfolding of events that her blood had prophesied. So precisely, the false fire alarm ringing out from the eastern gates, pulling guards away in a chaotic rush, while the traitorous merchants and their inside accomplices moved like ghosts through the secret underground passage toward the royal treasury. The air grew thick with anticipation, the distant clash of steel and shouted commands echoing faintly through the stone corridors as the theft reached its critical moment. Solana's inner thoughts swirled in a powerful storm of terror and unexpected pride, mingling like the crimson and gold of her hidden gift. She had done this, she had sent the warning through Lila, trusting in the ancient power of her blood to speak where her own voice had always been silenced. For years the world had seen only her fragility, the nosebleeds that marked her as unworthy, yet here In the shadows, her very essence was saving the kingdom from ruin, proving that the powerless could become the unseen guardians of destiny itself. The empowering realization lifted her spirit, even as fear clawed at her chest, reminding her of every past rejection, every cruel word that had taught her to stay invisible. What if they traced the prophecy back to her?
Welcome back to our channel. Today Mott V brought you a brand new and incredibly captivating story, sure to please you if we watch the whole video. This story is entirely fictional. The video was created using artificial intelligence AI and is designed to provide positive entertainment and educational value to viewers aged Muiba and up. Now let us continue exploring today's story.
What if Aether, whose rejection still echoed in her soul, turned that same cold gaze upon her once more? Yet deeper still, a quiet strength bloomed like dawn breaking after endless night, whispering that this was her turning point from oppressed shadow to a force that could not be ignored. Suddenly the tension shattered as the guards loyal to the crown converged on the treasury entrance at the exact moment foretold by her blood. Shouts rang out sharp and commanding, the clash of weapons brief but decisive as the thieves were surrounded and subdued in a flurry of disciplined action. Chests of gold and ancient jewels remained untouched, the kingdom's stability preserved by a single anonymous warning that had arrived just in time. Solana's breath caught in awe, watching from her hidden place as the captured traitors were dragged away, their faces pale with shock and defeat. The palace came alive with victorious energy lanterns flaring brighter and servants exchanging relieved glances, but her focus narrowed entirely on the figure emerging from the war room, Aether himself, striding into the main hall like a storm-given human form. His tall, powerful frame radiated authority, broad shoulders clad in dark royal robes, embroidered with threads of gold that caught the light, his golden eyes blazing with a mix of fury and profound relief. He moved with cinematic grace, commanding the space around him as advisors and guards gathered quickly, his deep, resonant voice cutting through the commotion like thunder. "Who brought this warning?" he demanded, his tone laced with urgency and an undercurrent of something deeper, something that made Solana's pulse quicken with the faint hum of their rejected bond. The prophecy on that cloth was too precise, too perfect to be mere luck. I want the source found immediately. No one in my court could have known those details, not the merchants' names, not the exact passage, not the timing of the false alarm. This was no ordinary message, it was prophecy, and I will know who possesses such a gift. Solana remained frozen in the shadows, her body trembling, as she observed him closely for the first time since the humiliating ceremony. His face, though stern and commanding, held a new intensity, a flicker of respect in his eyes that she had never seen directed at anyone like her. Her inner thoughts raced with emotional depth, terror twisting alongside an unexpected swell of pride and quiet empowerment. He was searching for her, the very man who had declared her unworthy, now demanding to understand the power he had once scorned. The bond between them stirred faintly, pulling at her heart with a warmth she tried desperately to ignore, reminding her that fate had woven their paths together long before his rejection. Yet she stayed hidden, her back pressed harder against the stone as servants and guards scattered to obey his orders, their footsteps echoing like a rising tide. Part of her longed to step forward to reveal herself and claim the voice her blood had given her, but the trauma of the past held her fast, the memory of his cold dismissal in the grand hall still fresh, enough to make her doubt every empowering instinct. She was the invisible Omega, no longer fragile in her own eyes, but still too afraid to be seen. The king continued to pace the hall, his voice growing more insistent as he questioned the advisors gathered around him. "This changes everything," he said, his words carrying through the corridor with emotional weight that reached even Solana's hidden spot. "For too long we have relied on strength and bloodlines alone, ignoring the quiet voices that might hold the true power of the realm. Whoever sent this warning has saved us from disaster, and I owe them a debt that cannot be ignored." His golden eyes scanned the shadows, almost as if sensing the pull of the bond, his expression shifting briefly to one of deep contemplation, a rare vulnerability crossing his features that made Solana's breath hitch. In that moment their gazes met for the briefest heartbeat across the distance, her wide eyes locking, with his intense ones through the dim light of the alcove. Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing to just the two of them, the air charged with unspoken recognition and the faint glow of destiny. Solana felt a rush of heat flood her cheeks, her heart leaping with a mix of fear, exhilaration, and the first fragile threads of hope that perhaps her gift could bridge the chasm his rejection had carved. But terror won out in that instant, the old lessons of silence and invisibility screaming at her to flee before he could connect the pieces. She turned abruptly, slipping deeper into the maze of lower corridors, her footsteps light and desperate as she ran, her mind a whirlwind of inner thoughts. Had he seen her, truly seen the Omega he had cast aside? Would this brief eye contact draw him closer, or bring new danger to her fragile world? The bond hummed stronger now, urging her forward, even as she fled, but the shadows offered her the only safety she had ever known. As Solana rounded a corner into a narrower passage, her breathing ragged and her hands pressed to her racing heart, she heard the distant sound of heavier footsteps following, purposeful and unyielding. The king's voice called out faintly in the distance, ordering a more thorough search of the lower halls, his tone now laced with something beyond command, something that sounded almost like determination and quiet wonder. She pressed herself into another alcove, pulse thundering in her ears, wondering if her act of courage had finally pulled her from the shadows, only to place her directly in the path of the one man whose gaze she both feared and longed to meet again. The palace around her seemed to hold its breath, the night alive with possibility and peril as ether drew nearer, his presence filling the corridors like an unstoppable force drawn by the very blood he had once rejected. In the days following the thwarted treasury theft, the palace thrummed with a restless energy that reached even the lower halls, where Solana continued her quiet labors, her hands steady on the scrubbing brush while her heart beat with the secret knowledge of her gift's growing power. Whispers among the servants spoke of new threats gathering at the kingdom's distant borders, where rival clans stirred with reports of raids and shadowy alliances that could endanger outlying villages and the lives of countless innocents. Solana felt the pull of it all deep in her bones, the faint hum of the rejected bond stirring more insistently now, as if Aether's own worries echoed through the invisible thread connecting them. She moved through her afternoon tasks in the herb gardens just beyond the palace walls, gathering fresh lavender and mint under a sky that had begun to darken with gathering storm clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. Her inner thoughts swirled with empowering resolve mixed with lingering fear, the memory of that brief eye contact in the hall still burning brightly, reminding her that her blood had already saved the treasury once, and perhaps it could protect more if she dared to listen. Yet the trauma of years spent invisible kept her cautious, whispering warnings of rejection and shame, even as a quiet voice inside her grew stronger, urging her to embrace the sacred ink flowing through her veins. As she knelt among the fragrant plants, the familiar warmth bloomed suddenly behind her nose, unbidden and urgent. Solana glanced around quickly, ensuring she was alone in the garden's secluded corner, before pulling a clean white cloth from her apron pocket and pressing it to her face. The crimson drops fell freely, and once more they rearranged themselves with that breathtaking, ethereal grace, glowing softly as they formed elegant script in the ancient language only her heart could fully decipher. This third prophecy was vivid and urgent, detailing a coordinated border raid planned for the coming dawn, when disguised scouts would cross the river under cover of mist, striking at the weakest villages and capturing innocents to weaken the kingdom's outer defenses. It named the traitorous clan leader, the exact crossing point, and even the hidden signal that would trigger the attack, all written with poetic precision that made Solana's breath catch in awe. Her mind raced with cinematic intensity, the imagery of distant fires and frightened families flashing before her eyes as she read the glowing words. This was her blood speaking again, not as weakness but as a beacon of salvation, a hidden gift that could save lives where armies and advisors had failed. The empowering surge filled her chest like warm sunlight, breaking through clouds reminding her of. The journey from silence shadow to bearer of truth from the girl the king had cast aside to someone whose voice now echoed in destiny's own language. Yet doubt lingered sharp as thorns. How could she act again without being discovered? The risk of exposing herself to the very court that had humiliated her felt overwhelming, but the bond tugged harder, now pulling her thoughts toward Aether with an intensity she could no longer ignore. She folded the cloth with reverent care, tucking it away, just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering against the garden leaves like urgent drumbeats. Lila appeared moments later, her Omega friend slipping through the garden path with a basket of linens, her eyes wide with shared understanding. Solana pressed the cloth into her hands, whispering the details of the prophecy, her voice soft, yet steady with newfound courage. "This one saves lives at the borders, Lila. Please find a way to get it to the king without naming me. We cannot let the innocent suffer when we hold the power to warn them." Lila nodded, her grip firm, and her expression filled with quiet admiration as she hurried away into the rain. Solana remained behind, her simple dress soon soaked through as the storm intensified the world around her, transforming into a cinematic tapestry of silver sheets of rain and wind-whipped branches. She sought shelter under a blooming archway in the palace gardens, the same secluded spot where roses and ivy climbed ancient stone walls now glistening with water. Her heart pounded with the knowledge that her gift had spoken, once more the prophecy already moving toward action while she tried desperately to melt back into invisibility. Unbeknownst to her, Aether had received the second anonymous warning through his trusted aides, and the impact had been immediate. In the grand war room, his golden eyes had blazed with fierce determination as he read the glowing script, his deep voice commanding scouts to the border at once. The raid was thwarted at dawn, just as foretold, the enemy scouts captured before they could strike, lives saved and villages spared from harm. Now the king himself had taken up the hunt for the mysterious source, his powerful frame moving with purposeful strides through the palace, his advisors trailing behind him as he demanded answers. The bond called to him insistently, drawing him toward the gardens where the rain fell in torrents, turning the paths into glistening mirrors of the stormy sky. He sensed her presence before he saw her, the faint hum of their connection growing stronger like a melody only he could hear, pulling him through the downpour until he stepped beneath the archway, his dark robes heavy with rain, his commanding presence filling the sheltered space like a force of nature itself. Solana froze, her back against the ivy-covered wall as Aether appeared only steps away, his golden eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made the world narrow to just the two of them. Rain dripped from his dark hair, tracing paths down his strong jaw, while thunder rumbled distantly, the cinematic storm mirroring the emotional tempest between them. She tried to shrink further into the shadows, her inner thoughts a whirlwind of fear and fragile hope. He was here, the man who had rejected her so publicly, now standing close enough that the bond sang between them, warm and undeniable. Why had her gift led to this moment? Was he angry or curious? The trauma of the ceremony flashed briefly, but the empowering voice inside her reminded her of the lives her blood had saved, the treasury, the borders, and how she was no longer just the fragile Omega he had dismissed. The king's voice, when it came, was low and hesitant, carrying a depth of emotion she had never heard from him before. "You the one who sent the warnings," he said, stepping closer, but not crowding her, his tone laced with respect and quiet wonder. "I have searched every hall for the source of these prophecies, and something draws me here to you. Tell me, Solana, how is it that your blood writes truths no seer can match?" His words hung in the rain-soaked air, vulnerable in a way that surprised her, revealing the first cracks in his once impenetrable armor. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper, as she spoke for the first time in his presence since the rejection. "It is not something I chose, my king, it simply is the nosebleeds I was punished for, the weakness you saw that day in the hall. They carry the future when they fall on white cloth. I hid it because the world taught me silence, but my blood would not stay quiet." The emotional dialogue flowed between them, tentative and slow burn, like the first rays of dawn after. Endless night, her inner thoughts swelling with cautious empowerment as she met his gaze, feeling seen. Truly seen for the gift she carried rather than the fragility he had once condemned. The bond hummed stronger, now a gentle current weaving around them as the rain continued to fall. Beyond the archway, creating a private world of mist and soft light. The king's expression softened further, his golden eyes holding regret and something deeper, something that spoke of redemption and the slow awakening of respect turning toward affection. He reached out slowly, his hand stopping just short of touching hers, respecting the space she still guarded. "You saved us twice now," he murmured, his voice rich with sincerity. "I was blind that day in the ceremony, blinded by pride and false ideals of perfection. Your gift is no weakness, Solana. It is the very power this kingdom needs." She felt the words wash over her like healing rain, her heart lifting with the empowering realization that her journey from invisible to heard was beginning in this rain-soaked garden where the bond finally began to pull them together despite the walls of the past. Yet as their conversation deepened with hesitant questions and shared vulnerabilities, the distant sound of approaching guards echoed through the gardens, their voices calling the king's name with urgent reports of new political unrest stirring in the noble courts, unrest that whispered of those who opposed any Omega rising to influence. Solana's pulse quickened as she realized the brief sanctuary of their first real exchange might already be ending, with unseen eyes turning toward them and the slow burn connection they had only just begun to explore, now threatened by forces beyond the rain. In the quiet aftermath of the rain-soaked garden meeting, Solana moved through the lower palace halls with a heart that refused to settle, the memory of Aether's softened golden eyes and his sincere words lingering like the faint scent of lavender after a storm. She had returned to her duties, scrubbing the long stone corridors on her knees, the rhythmic motion of the brush offering little comfort against the whirlwind inside her chest. Whispers had begun to spread among the servants. Faster than wildfire, Lila had told her in a hurried corner conversation, her friend's eyes wide with excitement and caution. "The king is searching for the source of the prophecies," she had said, "and he has ordered every old, blood-stained cloth from the past years to be collected from the laundry rooms, the discarded piles, and even the forgotten corners where servants once threw away what they thought were mere stains." Solana's hands had frozen mid-motion, her inner thoughts crashing like waves against the shores of her hard-won resolve. He was gathering proof, the very evidence of her hidden gift, the nosebleeds she had hidden for so long, now becoming the center of his obsession. Part of her felt a rush of empowering validation, the blood that had once marked her as unworthy was now being sought as treasure, yet deeper fear twisted through her, the trauma of his past rejection, whispering that this attention could shatter her fragile new courage. She continued her work, head down as always, but her pulse quickened with every distant footstep, wondering if the bond that hummed between them would finally pull her into the light or cast her back into deeper shadows. Meanwhile, in the private sanctum of his royal chambers, Aether stood alone before a wide oak table, illuminated by the soft glow of multiple lanterns. Servants had just finished delivering the collection, dozens upon dozens of carefully preserved white cloths, each one bearing the faint remnants of what he now recognized as far more than stains. His powerful frame cast a long shadow across the room, his broad shoulders tense under the weight of royal robes as he reached for the first cloth with hands that had commanded armies, yet now trembled slightly with anticipation. As he unfolded it, the dried blood rearranged in his mind's eye into the glowing script he had seen in the recent warnings, matching perfectly with events from years ago, a prophecy foretelling a minor court betrayal that had indeed cost the kingdom resources, another predicting a harsh winter famine that had been narrowly averted by timely preparations he had ordered without knowing why. The realization struck him like a thunderclap. These were not random marks, but precise, accurate prophecies written in the very blood he had scorned on that fateful day in the grand hall. For the first time in his reign, Aether's perspective shifted inward, his golden eyes clouding with a deep, profound regret that settled heavy in his chest like an anchor dragging him into uncharted waters. How could I have been so blind? He thought, the memory of Solana standing before him in her white gown, the sudden nosebleeds staining the fabric replaying with painful clarity. I called her fragile, unworthy, cast her aside publicly, because my pride demanded a perfect, made a strong bloodline, untouched by what I saw as weakness. Yet here in these cloths is the truth she has been writing, the kingdom's future for years, saving us from disasters I never even knew loomed while I remained
my name,
arrogant and blind to the power flowing through
but
her
I
veins.
must go on.
The bond one rejected out of ignorance has been calling to me all along, and I silenced it with cruelty. Now I see the depth of my mistake, the way I silenced a voice the realm desperately needed. His internal storm raged with raw emotion, the once unyielding Alpha King confronting her transformation within himself from a ruler who valued only strength to a man awakening to the quiet power of the powerless. He read on cloth after cloth, each prophecy confirming past events with eerie precision his regret, deepening into a burning resolve to find her, to make amends, to earn the trust he had shattered so carelessly. Word of the king's search reached Solana through hushed messages from Lila, who had overheard the servants in the upper halls. He is reading every one of them, Solana. Lila had whispered, their hands brushing in the laundry room. The cloths are piling up in his chambers, and he has ordered a full search of the lower levels for the Omega who carries this gift. He spoke your name once, asking if anyone knew the rejected girl from the ceremony. Solana, breath caught sharply, her body going still as she processed the news in the dim light of the storage alcove where they hid. Her inner thoughts swelled with a complex tide of fear and unexpected empowerment. The girl who had been invisible for so long was now the focus of the king. Obsession, her blood no longer a mark of shame, but a beacon drawing him back to her. She felt the slow burn pull of the bond strengthening like a gentle flame kindling in her chest, warming the cold places his rejection had left behind. Yet the trauma still lingered sharp and real, reminding her of the public humiliation, the way he had declared her unworthy before the entire court. Could this be real, or was it another test that would end in fresh pain? She folded a fresh cloth in her hands, her fingers tracing the fabric as if seeking guidance from the gift itself, wondering if her prophecies would continue to speak even as the king drew closer to uncovering her secret. The empowering journey she had begun from oppressed silence to a voice written in blood felt more real than ever, yet the uncertainty of his regret left her heart suspended between hope and doubt. As the evening lanterns flickered to life, casting golden patterns across the palace walls, Solana retreated to her tiny chamber, bolting the door with a soft click. She sank onto her cot, pulling her knees to her chest, the weight of the day's revelations pressing down like the gathering storm clouds outside.
How long must
the
I
bond hummed
endure
warmly,
this?
now a constant reminder that Aether was searching for her, specifically his regret transforming the distance between them into something almost tangible. She closed her eyes, imagining him in his chambers, surrounded by the cloths her blood had written. The man who had once cast her away, now humbled by the very power he had dismissed.
There has to be a way out.
A quiet smile touched her lips, for the first time in years, the sense of being seen not as fragile, but as essential, filling her with a strength she had never known. Yet as she reached for a small white cloth to prepare for the inevitable next nosebleed, a sharp knock sounded at her door, heavy and insistent, echoing through the small space like a warning from fate itself. The voice on the other side was unfamiliar, but commanding, a royal guard sent on the king's direct orders. Open the door, Omega. The king demands to speak with you about the prophecies. He seeks the source, and your name has been mentioned. Solana's heart leaped into her throat as the knock came again, more urgent this time, the moment of revelation arriving faster than she had imagined, pulling her from the shadows toward a confrontation that could change everything or break her completely. The heavy knock at her chamber door echoed once more through the tiny space, pulling Solana from her frozen moment of dread as she rose on unsteady legs and unbolted the latch with fingers that trembled despite the quiet strength building inside her. The beta guard
Where
stood
are
there, his
you?
expression neutral, but respectful, bowing slightly before speaking
Answer
in
me!
a low tone that carried the weight of royal command. "The king has come himself to the lower halls, my lady. He seeks you
I
directly,
have to get
and will
out
not
of
be kept
here.
waiting." Solana's heart leaped into her throat, the faint hum of the bond flaring
They're
warmer and
coming
more
for
insistent.
me.
As she stepped out into the dimly lit corridor, her simple gray apron still dusted with the day's labors. She followed the guard through the
dare
winding
defy the
passages, her
crown.
mind a whirlwind of guarded
Your
inner
crown
thoughts
is a lie.
that danced between terror and a
Then
fragile
you will
spark of
rot
hope.
in the dungeons.
He had come down here to her world of shadows
won't
and
be
invisibility,
silenced.
Aether, who had once rejected her
Gods!
so,
Take
publicly now
her!
drawn by the very blood he had scorned.
I can't
Was this the beginning of
stay
redemption,
here.
or another layer of humiliation? Yet beneath the fear, her hidden gift whispered empowerment,
have to
reminding
see
her
what's
that she was no
beyond.
longer just. The fragile Omega cast
Please,
aside, she was the
let
voice
me
of prophecy,
through.
the one whose quiet power had already saved the treasury
I
and the
have
borders.
to find you.
The lower halls opened into a wider alcove near the herb storage where
Where
lanterns
are
cast
you?
soft golden pools of light across the stone floors,
Answer
and the air
me!
carried the faint scent of dried lavender. There he stood, Aether, his tall, commanding frame, somehow less imposing in these humble surroundings. His dark royal robes brushing the edges of the worn flagstones. His golden eyes found hers, immediately softening with a vulnerability she had never imagined possible in a man of his power. Servants paused in their tasks, staring openly, but he waved them away with a gentle motion of his hand, creating a private space amid the palace's underbelly. Solana's breath caught as he stepped closer, not crowding her, but close enough that the bond between them sang like a soft melody weaving through the quiet air. His voice, when it came, was low and rich with genuine remorse, carrying the weight of deep reflection rather than command. "Solana," he began, the sound of her name on his lips, sending a shiver through her soul. "I have read every cloth, every prophecy your blood has written over the years, and I stand before you humbled by truths I was too blind to see. That day in the grand hall, I let pride and false ideals of perfection guide me. I called you unworthy because I saw only the nosebleed, the so-called fragility, never once considering that it might be the sacred ink of destiny itself. I was wrong, deeply and unforgivably wrong, and the regret has kept me awake through every night since the warnings began." His words hung between them, tender and honest, the cinematic light from the lanterns playing across his strong features, revealing the lines of exhaustion and self-doubt that had etched themselves there since his awakening. Solana stood rooted, her inner thoughts swirling with a powerful mix of guarded caution and the slow blooming of trust. Years of silence and trauma had taught her to measure every word, yet here in this humble alcove with the man who had broken her heart, now offering apology, she felt the empowering shift inside her from invisible servant to someone worthy of being heard. She met his gaze steadily, her voice soft but steady as she spoke for the first time in true dialogue with him. "My king, the gift was never something I sought or understood. It began in childhood with nosebleeds that my mother warned me to hide at all costs. She taught me that in a world ruled by Alpha's strength and perfect bloodlines, Omegas like me must remain silent and unseen, or we would be crushed. I believed her, especially after the ceremony, when your rejection confirmed every fear. For years I mopped up the blood and threw away the cloths, thinking they were marks of shame, never dreaming they carried prophecies that could save lives. I stayed invisible because it was safer, because speaking meant risking everything again. But the blood would not stay quiet, and now it has led me here to this moment where I must decide if I can trust the bond one once thought shattered." Her words flowed with emotional depth, each one laced with the poetic beauty of long-held pain, transforming into quiet strength, the slow-burn connection between them deepening as vulnerability bridged the chasm of the past. The king listened with rapt attention, his golden eyes never leaving hers, his powerful frame leaning slightly forward, as if every syllable she uttered was rewriting his understanding of the world. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers, not touching, but offering the choice, the gesture filled with respect and the first tender sparks of something deeper, something that felt like earned affection blooming in the space between them. "I see you now, Solana," he murmured, his voice warm and sincere. "Not as the fragile girl I wrongly discarded, but as the woman whose gift holds the future of this kingdom, and perhaps of us both. Your silence was never weakness, it was survival, and I vow to spend every day earning the right to stand beside you to protect the voice your blood has given you." The bond hummed brighter between them, a gentle current of warmth that made her chest tighten with cautious hope, the slow burn romance sparking like the first embers of a fire carefully tended after long cold nights. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time, the empowering journey from oppressed to powerful, unfolding in this honest exchange where his regret met her guarded heart and began to heal what had been broken. They spoke further in quiet tones, sharing fragments of their worlds, his questions about the prophecies gentle and curious, hers answers revealing the depth of her isolation and the quiet dreams she had harbored in the shadows. The conversation wove emotional layers of understanding and tentative connection, the cinematic imagery of the lower halls around them feeling almost sacred in its simplicity, the distant sounds of palace life fading into a private sanctuary. Yet as their words drew to a natural pause, and the king stepped back slightly with a soft promise to meet again soon, Solana's gaze drifted past his shoulder. In the far shadows of the corridor, several court nobles lingered, watching with suspicious eyes, their faces etched with disapproval and whispered calculations. They had followed him down here uninvited, their presence a silent threat that the growing bond between an Alpha King and a once rejected Omega had not gone unnoticed. The mini cliffhanger hung in the air as one noble stepped forward slightly, his expression cold and calculating, the political storm already beginning to brew around them. In the days that followed their first honest exchange in the lower alcove, Aether arranged for Solana to join him in the palace library, a vast chamber of towering oak shelves lined with ancient tomes that reached toward vaulted ceilings where soft beams of afternoon light filtered through tall, arched windows like threads of liquid gold weaving through dust motes. He had insisted on the meeting under the guise of studying her prophecies more closely, but the pull of the bond between them had grown undeniable, guiding them both to this quiet sanctuary where the outside world of whispering nobles and political shadows felt momentarily distant. Solana stepped into the space, her simple gray dress contrasting with the rich velvet chairs and polished marble floors, her heart fluttering with a careful balance of lingering fear and the first tender shoots of cautious hope. She had never been allowed in such a grand room before, her invisible life confined to the lower halls where books were scarce and knowledge a luxury for those above her station. Yet here she was invited not as a servant, but as the bearer of a gift the king now treated with reverence, his powerful presence softened by the warm glow of lanterns placed strategically around a long central table scattered with the collected cloths her blood had written over the years. Her inner thoughts swirled like the gentle currents of a stream finding its path after long obstruction as she watched him pull out a chair for her with a gesture that spoke volumes of respect he had once withheld. The trauma of the past still lingered in quiet corners of her mind, the public rejection in the grand hall, the cruel words that had branded her unworthy, but each moment in his company chipped away at those old scars, revealing the empowering truth that her journey was transforming her from silenced shadow to a woman whose voice carried the weight of destiny. She felt seen not as fragility, but as essential, the hidden gift in her blood, no longer a curse, but a bridge slowly mending what pride had broken. The king sat across from her, his golden eyes reflecting the lantern light as he carefully unfolded one of the older cloths, the dried script glowing faintly under his touch with memories of prophecies that had shaped events long before he understood their source. His deep voice when he spoke was gentle, laced with the raw honesty of a man confronting his own loneliness in the vastness of power. Solana, these writings, they have guided the kingdom through storms I never knew were coming, he said, his tone carrying the weight of years spent ruling alone, surrounded by advisors who echoed his commands but never challenged the isolation of the throne. I have spent my life believing strength meant standing apart from anything that appeared weak, never realizing that true power flows from the quiet voices I once ignored. In these cloths I see not just predictions but the proof of my blindness, and in you I see the companion I have unknowingly longed for through every empty night in these halls. Solana listened, her breath catching as his words wrapped around her like a warm cloak against the chill of past doubts, her inner journey unfolding with each shared glance, from fear rooted in years of oppression to a cautious hope that bloomed like the first dawn light after endless night. She traced a finger along the edge of a cloth, her voice soft, yet steady with the poetic beauty of emotions long held in silence. My king, I dreamed in the shadows of a life where my blood might mean something more than shame, where I could speak without fear of being cast aside again. The nosebleeds that marked my days taught me to hide, but they also carried whispers of futures I could not ignore, futures of safety and fairness for Omegas who have always lived unseen. Your rejection that day shattered those fragile dreams, yet now sitting here with you studying what my blood has written, I feel the slow return of light, the bond between us weaving trust where once there was only pain. She paused, her eyes meeting his, the emotional dialogue flowing like a river finding its natural course, revealing layers of her soul, the dreams of a world where chosen family mattered more than bloodlines, the quiet longing for a voice that could change the kingdom from within. The king leaned forward slightly, his hand resting near hers on the table, not touching but close enough that the bond hummed warmly between them, a slow burn connection building like the steady rise of dawn painting the horizon after the longest night. He shared fragments of his own heart, in return his voice rich with vulnerability that humanized the commanding Alpha she had feared. I have ruled with an iron will, believing it kept me strong, but it left me alone, Solana, surrounded by loyalty that masked emptiness. Your gift has shown me the cost of my arrogance, and your presence reminds me that redemption is possible when one is willing to listen and learn. I regret every word I spoke in that ceremony, every moment I let pride blind me to the woman before me, now the one whose blood writes hope where I saw only weakness. Together we could build something greater, a kingdom where no voice is silenced. His words sank deep into her heart, stirring the empowering transformation within her, from the oppressed Omega who once scrubbed floors in silence to a figure of quiet power whose dreams aligned with his growing vision of change. They spent hours in that library, poring over the cloths side by side, their conversation weaving between the prophecies and personal revelations, gentle laughter occasionally breaking the solemnity. As she explained the ancient language her blood instinctively knew, and he listened with genuine wonder, his golden eyes never leaving her face. The cinematic light shifted as the sun moved across the windows, casting warm patterns across the table, illuminating the growing trust between them like a sacred tapestry, being woven thread by careful thread. As the afternoon deepened into evening and lanterns glowed brighter against the gathering dusk, Solana felt the slow burn romance deepening, not in grand gestures, but in these shared quiet moments, where his regret met her cautious hope, and together they forged the first fragile foundations of something enduring. She allowed herself to imagine a future where her gift flourished openly, where Omegas like her found strength in community, and the bond between them became a force for good rather than a painful echo. Yet as they rose to leave the library, the king offering her his arm in a gesture of quiet protection, the distant sound of raised voices filtered through the heavy doors, nobles arguing in the corridor, beyond their tones sharp with disapproval and urgency. One voice cut through clearly, a high-ranking advisor warning of unrest in the noble houses, those who viewed an Omega's rising influence as a threat to tradition and power. The mini cliffhanger hung in the air as the king tensed, his expression shifting to one of protective resolve, while Solana's heart quickened, wondering if the light they had found in the library would withstand the gathering storm of political conflict closing in around them. In the shadowed corridors leading away from the grand library, where lanterns still flickered with The warmth of their shared revelations, Solana moved with a heart caught between the gentle light of newfound connection and the gathering clouds of unease that seemed to press in from every corner of the palace. The king's arm had offered her a moment of quiet protection as they parted ways at the edge of the upper halls, his golden eyes holding hers with a promise of more conversations, more trust slowly earned through the slow burn of understanding that had begun to heal old wounds. Yet as she descended the stone stairs back toward the lower levels where her invisible life still anchored her, the distant murmurs of voices caught her attention, sharp and conspiratorial, drifting from a half-open door to one of the noble council chambers. She paused in the dim alcove, her body instinctively pressing against the cool wall, the cinematic play of torchlight casting long, uneasy shadows across the marble floor like fingers reaching for secrets. Her inner thoughts surged with a powerful wave of empowerment mixed with the familiar bite of fear. The journey from silenced Omega to bearer of prophecy had already changed her, but the world of Alphas and their rigid traditions refused to yield without a fight. Peering carefully around the edge of the doorway, she glimpsed a group of high-ranking nobles gathered around a heavy table, their faces illuminated by candlelight etched with disapproval and calculated ambition. The lead voice belonged to Lord Varen, a stern advisor whose bloodline had served the throne for generations, his tone laced with venom as he leaned forward. "This reliance on the rejected Omega is madness," he declared, the words slicing through the air like a blade. "The king has lost his way, allowing her blood prophecies to guide decisions that should belong to true alphas of strength and perfect lineage. She is unworthy, a fragile remnant from the bonding ceremony. We all witnessed her nosebleeds staining the gown, a public mark of weakness. If he continues to elevate her, the court will fracture, factions already whisper of rebellion. Alliances forming to restore order before this so-called gift undermines everything we stand for." The others nodded, their murmurs rising in agreement, painting vivid images of unrest, plots to isolate the king from her influence, even suggestions of spreading rumors that her prophecies were fabricated tricks to ensnare the throne. Solana's breath caught sharply, her pulse thundering as the weight of their words pressed down upon her chest, the trauma of past rejections flaring bright and painful, yet beneath it a quiet fire of resolve began to burn hotter than ever. These nobles saw only the invisible servant, the one cast aside, but her blood had already proven its power, saving the treasury, the borders, and now perhaps the very heart of the kingdom itself. The empowering realization washed over her like a tide, turning the powerless into the unseen guardian, reminding her that true change came not from force, but from the voice her gift had given her, the voice of the voiceless, rising to protect what mattered. She slipped away silently, her footsteps light, and hurried through the winding passages, the bond with the king humming faintly in her chest, a warm anchor amid the storm of political conflict brewing around them. Back in the safety of a small storage room, she sank to the floor, her hands trembling as another familiar warmth built behind her nose, urgent and insistent. Pulling a clean white cloth from her apron, she pressed it to her face, just as the crimson drops fell, freely rearranging themselves with that breathtaking ethereal grace into glowing script that revealed a new prophecy, one that sent chills racing down her spine. It detailed the noble plot in precise poetic lines, naming Lord Varen and his allies, the exact timing of their planned council meeting to undermine the king, the hidden alliances with border clans, seeking to exploit the unrest and the subtle poison they intended to spread through court whispers to turn the kingdom against her influence. The words pulsed with warning, urging action before the rebellion could take root, tearing at the fragile trust she and the king had begun to build. Solana's inner thoughts tumbled in a cinematic rush of emotion, awe at the gift's clarity warring with paralyzing doubt, the fear of stepping forward again after years of enforced silence, the risk of being labeled a threat herself too great to ignore. Should she reveal this prophecy to the king, risking the noble's wrath and drawing more eyes upon her? Or keep it hidden to protect the slow burn connection they shared the one that promised redemption and a brighter future for all Omegas. The empowering journey from oppressed to powerful pulled her toward courage, reminding her that staying invisible had never truly saved her, it had only delayed the moment when her voice could change the world. She folded the cloth carefully, tucking it into her pocket, her mind racing as she debated the choice, weighing the safety of shadows against the call of destiny that now echoed louder than the noble's threats. The palace around her seemed to hold its breath, the distant sounds of servants moving through the halls carrying an undercurrent of tension, as if the very stones sensed the gathering storm. Solana rose to her feet, her steps purposeful, yet cautious, as she made her way toward the upper levels, intending to find Lila or another trusted ally to pass the warning without exposing herself fully. Yet as she turned a corner into a wider corridor, the air grew thick with sudden urgency, the sound of heavy armored footsteps echoing from multiple directions, armed guards moving with deliberate speed, their lanterns cutting through the dimness like searching blades. Her heart leaped into her throat as she pressed herself into a narrow alcove, the cinematic tension building like a storm about to break, the guards' voices carrying commands that chilled her to the core. Search every lower passage, the head guard ordered, his tone sharp and unyielding. The king has been warned of unrest, and we seek any who might carry information on the noble plots, especially the Omega known for the blood prophecies. They are closing and searching for her, specifically the very woman whose gift had ignited the conflict. Solana froze, her body trembling with a mix of fear and quiet determination, wondering if her secret had already begun to unravel, if the political forces now hunting her would force her from the shadows into a confrontation that could either shatter her world or finally give her the voice to rewrite it. In the narrow alcove where shadows clung like protective veils, Solana pressed her back against the cold stone, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the armed guards' lanterns swept closer, their heavy footsteps echoing like thunder through the lower corridors. The prophecy cloth burned in her pocket, a silent warning of the noble plot that now seemed to close in from every direction, the political storm, no longer a distant whisper, but a raging force, threatening to engulf the fragile light she had found in the king's presence. Her inner thoughts surged with a powerful tide of empowerment, rising against the old currents of fear. The journey from invisible servant to bearer of destiny had already reshaped her soul, reminding her that her blood carried truths capable of toppling thrones, and that staying silent would only allow the unworthy to prevail. Yet the trauma of years spent hiding still whispered doubts. The risk of being dragged into the open felt overwhelming as the guards' voices grew louder, calling her name with urgent commands that sent chills racing down her spine. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, drawing strength from the bond that hummed warmly in her chest, the faint but steady pull toward ether like an anchor in the gathering chaos. Suddenly the corridor filled with a commanding presence that shifted the very air. Ether strode into view, his tall frame cutting through the lantern light like a force of nature, his golden eyes blazing with protective fire as he raised a hand to halt the guards in their tracks. The cinematic scene unfolded with breathtaking intensity, the armored men freezing mid-step there,
my name,
faces paling under his gaze, while servants and nobles who had gathered at the
on.
commotion watched in stunned silence from the edges of the hall. The king positioned himself squarely between Solana and the advancing force, his broad shoulders a living shield, his deep resonant voice ringing out with unyielding authority that echoed off the stone walls. Stand down, he commanded, the words laced with a fierce resolve that left no room for argument. This Omega is under my direct protection, and any who seek to question her presence or her gift will answer to me personally. She has saved this kingdom more times than most of you can count, with prophecies that have proven truer than any counsel offered in my war room. I will not allow fear or outdated traditions to hunt her like a criminal when her blood writes the very future we all depend upon. Solana's heart swelled with a rush of inner empowerment that felt like dawn breaking after endless night, her body straightening as she stepped slightly forward from the alcove, no longer shrinking. into shadows, but standing
My
taller,
lord,
the weight of years of
I
oppression
bring you
lifting as
this.
his public defense
What
washed
is it?
over her like healing rain.
Speak.
For the first
It is
time,
the
she felt
key
truly
from
seen,
the
not as the
ruins.
fragile girl rejected
A
in the
key?
grand hall,
Let me
but as
see
a
it.
It
woman whose
unlocks
voice
the
through her
ancient
gift
power.
could reshape the world, the
shall
chosen
see.
family of those like Lila and the
I
silenced
have to
Omegas
get
now
out of
finding
here.
hope in this very moment. The king turned
They
to her,
could
his
be
expression softening
anywhere.
with raw emotion as the guards retreated reluctantly, leaving them in a private circle
This
amid the
way,
watching eyes, his
maybe.
voice dropping to a heated yet tender
The shadows
exchange meant for her
gather.
ears alone, yet
War
carrying
is
enough
upon
strength to
us.
silence the murmurs
What
around
is
them.
your command,
Solana,
my
he said the
lord?
name spoken with deep reverence and regret, his golden eyes locking onto
you
hers
must
with
lead.
an intensity that made the bond flare brighter between them. I admit my past mistake fully,
The feast
and without
must be
reservation
ready
that
by
day in the
nightfall.
ceremony, I let arrogance blind
It
me to
will
the
be,
sacred
my
power
lord.
in your blood.
Good.
I called you unworthy
Spare
because
no
I clung to
effort.
false ideals of perfection,
Understood.
ignoring the
More
quiet
wood for the
strength
fire.
that had always been there in
Right
you.
away.
My rejection shattered something precious, and I have carried the shame of it ever since reading those cloths, seeing how my blindness nearly cost the kingdom everything. You are not fragile, you are the voice this realm has needed, and I vow to stand beside you not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a man earning the right to love the woman who has shown me what true power means. His words carried the weight of full
How
confession,
long
the
must
slow
I
burn
endure
romance deepening
this?
into something unbreakable as vulnerability met her guarded heart and forged it stronger. She met
I
his
will
gaze, her
not
voice
be
emerging
broken.
soft but steady with the poetic emotion of a soul awakening, the
I can't
inner
stay
thoughts
here.
blooming with quiet triumph as she replied, feeling the empowering transformation
There
complete
has
in
to
this
be a
public
way
stand.
out.
My king, your defense means more than you know. After
Please
years
let
of being
me
taught to
find
remain
it.
invisible, your words give me the courage to believe my gift can change things for every Omega who has lived in silence. The bond between us has grown from pain to possibility, and I trust it now because you have shown me redemption is not just words but actions. Yet even as she spoke, the heated exchange revealing layers of their shared vulnerability, the distant sound of raised voices from the noble chambers filtered through the hall. Lord Varen and his allies,
I will have order.
emerging with calculated
She
fury,
cursed
their
our
faces twisted in open
Please,
opposition as they
mercy.
demanded an
Enough.
audience,
She
with the
is
king
under
accusing
my
him of weakness
protection.
for elevating a rejected Omega. The bond strengthened
Pain
further
is
between
endless.
Solana and the king, a warm current of unity wrapping
I
around
cannot
them like an
bear
invisible
it.
shield, but the danger closed invisibly, the political forces outside
Help
the
me.
immediate circle gathering momentum with whispers of rebellion and threats that could tear the kingdom
I have to
apart.
find you.
Solana's pulse quickened as the king's hand brushed hers in a brief
Where
gesture
are
of
you?
solidarity, his protective stance unwavering, yet the mini
Answer
cliffhanger
me!
hung heavy in the air as one noble stepped forward, declaring that the council would convene at dawn to challenge this alliance,
I have to get
and the
out of
unrest
here.
brewing in the shadows threatened to erupt into open conflict before the night could fade.
They're coming for
Under the
me.
silvery embrace of the full moon that hung like a luminous guardian in the velvet sky, the ancient ritual circle atop the palace's
You
hidden
dare
eastern
defy
tower
the
came
crown.
alive with a quiet, sacred
Your
power
crown is a
that seemed to
lie.
pulse in rhythm with Solana's
Then you
own
will
heartbeat.
rot in the dungeons.
She had agreed to the ceremony only
I won't
hours
be
earlier, after the
silenced.
king's heartfelt plea in the shadowed corridor, his voice
Take
carrying
her!
the weight of devotion and the promise that this
can't
ritual would
stay
fully awaken
here.
the gift she had hidden for so long. Now she stood barefoot at the center of the weathered
I
stone
have
circle
to
where
see
massive
what's
granite pillars,
beyond.
etched with forgotten runes, rose like
Please,
silent sentinels, their surfaces
me
glowing
through.
faintly under the moonlight, as if the earth itself
have
remembered
to
the old
find
ways
you.
of blood and prophecy. The air carried the crisp scent of night,
Where
blooming
are
jasmine,
you?
and distant rain, the cinematic beauty of the scene
Answer
wrapping around her
me!
like a cloak woven from starlight and destiny itself. Torches placed at each cardinal point flickered with soft golden flames, casting dancing shadows that played across the smooth altar stone in the middle, where a large expanse of pristine white cloth waited like an open canvas for her blood to speak its final truths. Solana's inner thoughts swirled with a profound sense of stepping into power, the empowering journey From the oppressed invisible Omega who once scrubbed floors in fear to this moment of transformation, where her blood would no longer be a mark of shame, but the sacred ink that rewrote the world's injustices. For years she had cowered from the nosebleeds, believing them to be curses that made her unworthy yet. Here under the moon's watchful eye she felt the ancient gift stirring within her veins like a river, finally breaking free from its dam, ready to flow with clarity and strength. The trauma of the past still lingered in quiet whispers, the public rejection, the noble plots, the years of enforced silence, but those shadows now felt distant compared to the radiant courage. Blooming in her chest the realization that she could protect not only the kingdom, but every silenced voice like her own. The bond with Aether hummed warmly, stronger than ever, pulling her forward into this high-stakes awakening where vulnerability met destiny and forged something unbreakable. The king stood just beyond the circle's edge, his tall, commanding frame a steadfast guardian, his dark robes blending with the night, yet his golden eyes locked on her with unwavering devotion that made her heart ache with quiet gratitude. He had insisted on standing watch himself, sword at his side, though no blade could match the protective fire in his gaze, a fire born from the deep regret he had confessed so openly in their library conversations, and the slow burn love that had grown between them like dawn after the longest night. Solana, he called softly, his deep voice carrying across the stones with emotional tenderness that wrapped around her like a promise. You do not have to do this alone. I am here not as a king demanding perfection, but as the man who sees your true strength and vows to guard it with every breath I take. Your blood has already saved us more times than I deserve, and now it will awaken fully under the moon's light, revealing the queen you were always meant to become. Tell me what you need, and I will provide it without hesitation, for you have taught me that true power lies in lifting the powerless, not in ruling from above. She met his gaze, her voice emerging soft, yet resonant with the poetic emotion of a soul stepping fully into its light. My king, I agree to this ritual, because your faith has given me the courage I never knew I possessed. For so long I believed my gift was a burden, a reason to stay invisible, but tonight under these ancient stones I feel it transforming into the voice I was born to share. The nosebleeds that once brought shame will now write the future openly, and I am ready to embrace that power, not for myself, but for every Omega who has lived in shadows like I did. Your devotion means everything to me. It bridges the chasm your past mistake created, and shows me that redemption can light the way for us both. Together we can change the laws that silenced so many, and build a world where chosen family matters more than bloodlines. The emotional dialogue flowed between them like the gentle wind stirring the jasmine vines around the tower, their words weaving a tapestry of trust and quiet affection, the bond flaring brighter as he nodded with a depth of love that made her feel truly seen, empowered, and no longer alone. As the moon reached its zenith, bathing the circle in pure silver radiance, Solana stepped closer to the altar stone, her hands steady as she prepared for the awakening. The familiar warmth built behind her nose, not with dread, but with purpose, and when the first crimson drops fell onto the white cloth, they moved with breathtaking ethereal grace, rearranging into glowing script that pulsed with ancient light, revealing prophecies of unity and justice for the kingdom's most overlooked voices. The runes on the surrounding stones began to shimmer in response, their glow syncing with her blood's script in a cinematic symphony of light and destiny that filled the night air with a sense of profound transformation. Her inner thoughts soared with empowerment, the once fragile girl, now standing tall as the gift fully awakened within her body and spirit, radiating a quiet strength that seemed to make the very moonlight bend in reverence. She felt the power settling into her bones like a crown of starlight, the journey from oppression to authority complete in this sacred moment where her blood wrote not just warnings, but the blueprint for a brighter realm. The king watched with awe, his devotion evident in the way he remained vigilant, his presence a pillar of support that allowed her to embrace the ritual without fear. Yet as the final lines of the glowing prophecy etched themselves across the cloth and the stones, Hummed with awakened energy, a distant rustle echoed from the tower stairs below, followed by the faint clash of steel and urgent whispers carried on the wind. The traitorous nobles, led by Lord Varen, had discovered the ritual's location and were ascending with armed followers, their intent to disrupt the awakening clear in the tension that suddenly thickened. The air threatening to shatter the sacred circle before Solana's transformation could fully seal her power and their shared future. The ritual circle thrummed with an ancient energy that seemed to lift Solana higher as the final lines of her blood prophecy glowed brighter on the white cloth, pulsing like living heartbeats under the full moon's silver gaze. The crimson script revealed not only warnings but the complete exposure of the noble conspiracy, naming every traitor in Lord Varen's circle, their hidden alliances with border clans, the precise moment they planned to strike the council at dawn, and the subtle poisons they intended to spread through whispered lies to fracture the kingdom from within. Her inner thoughts soared with radiant confidence, the once silenced Omega now feeling every drop of her blood transform into pure unshakable power, the journey from invisible shadow to awakened force, complete in this sacred flame of truth that burned away years of fear and oppression. She stood taller, her simple dress seeming to shimmer with ethereal light as the gift fully awakened within her veins, filling her body and spirit with a quiet strength that radiated outward like dawn breaking across the tower stones. The runes on the surrounding pillars flared in response, their glow syncing perfectly with her prophecy, creating a breathtaking cinematic symphony of light and destiny that filled the night air with the empowering promise of change for every voice that had been crushed under the weight of old traditions. In that transcendent moment, Solana's perspective shifted inward with profound empowerment. The trauma of childhood warnings, her mother's fearful lessons, the public rejection in the grand hall, all dissolved like mist under the moon's embrace. She was no longer the fragile girl who had nosebleeds in shame. She was the bearer of truth, the woman whose blood wrote justice and whose bond with Aether had earned its place through slow, patient redemption. The power settled deep into her bones like a crown of starlight, making her feel truly alive for the first time, her heart swelling with the knowledge that she could now protect the powerless and reshape the laws that had kept Omegas invisible for generations. A soft gasp escaped her lips as the final prophecy line completed itself on the cloth, exposing the entire plot in elegant glowing script that would leave no doubt for the court when dawn arrived. The king, standing just beyond the circle's edge, felt his own perspective shift inward in a rare, deep internal moment, his golden eyes fixed on Solana with awe and love that burned brighter than any torch. How could I have ever doubted her, he thought, the regret he had carried since the ceremony, now fully transformed into unwavering devotion. She stands there like a flame of truth I once tried to extinguish, and now her light reveals everything I failed to see. My pride blinded me to the sacred power in her blood, but watching her awaken under this moon, I know redemption is not a word, but a living bond earned through every quiet conversation, every shared vulnerability. She is my queen in spirit, already the one who will change this kingdom, and I will stand beside her. Not as ruler, but as partner, protector, and the man who loves her with every fiber of my being. His broad shoulders straightened with renewed purpose, the sword at his side forgotten in the face of her radiant transformation, his heart swelling with the slow burn love that had grown from mistake to unbreakable truth. Solana turned toward him, her eyes meeting his across the glowing circle, her voice emerging with a new resonant strength that carried the poetic weight of her full awakening. My king, the prophecy is complete. It names every conspirator and the exact hour they will strike. My blood has spoken its final truth tonight, and I feel the power within me no longer hidden but alive, ready to give voice to every silenced Omega. Your faith in this ritual has completed what years of fear could not break, and together we will walk into the dawn, not as rejected and regretful, but as partners who rewrite the world. The emotional dialogue wove between them, tender and empowering, the bond flaring like living fire as He stepped to the edge of the circle, his hand reaching out to clasp hers, the touch sending waves of warmth through them both. "I see you fully now, Solana," he replied, his deep voice rich with love and resolve. "You are the flame that lights the way, and I am yours completely." Yet even as their hands met, and the ritual reached its breathtaking peak, the distant rustle from the tower stairs grew louder into the unmistakable sound of multiple footsteps climbing fast, followed by the sharp clash of steel being drawn. The traders, led by Lord Varen, had reached the final landing, their armed followers close behind. Faces twisted with fury and desperation as they burst into view at the edge of the ritual circle, ready to disrupt the awakening before Solana's full strength could seal their doom and the king's defense could hold. The grand throne hall of the Eternal Palace glowed under the morning sun that streamed through towering stained glass windows, painting the marble floors in vibrant hues of crimson and gold, as if the very light itself had come to witness the awakening of truth. Solana stood at the center of the assembled court, her simple white gown now embroidered with subtle threads of prophecy script that shimmered faintly with the power of the ritual the night before. The air hummed with tension, nobles and advisors filling the rows of velvet seats, their faces a mix of shocked curiosity and open hostility as Lord Varen and his allies clustered near the front, their eyes narrowed in defiance. Yet beside her Aether stood tall and unyielding, his golden eyes fixed on her with unwavering support. His hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a silent vow that echoed the bond they had forged through regret and slow-earned trust. The cinematic weight of the moment pressed upon her, the grand chandeliers sparkling like captured stars, the distant murmur of the crowd fading into a reverent hush as she stepped forward for the first time, not as the invisible Omega rejected in this very hall, but as the voice that would rewrite its future. Her inner thoughts surged with empowering fire, the journey from the shadows of the lower halls where she had scrubbed floors in silence to this sunlit throne room where her blood's prophecies would finally be heard aloud, felt like a sacred transformation, complete and unbreakable. Years of trauma, the childhood warnings from her mother, the public humiliation of the bonding ceremony, the noble plots that had hunted her through the corridors, all melted away in the radiant certainty that her gift was no longer hidden, but a beacon for every silenced soul. She was no longer fragile or unworthy. She was the bearer of destiny, the woman whose voice would lift the powerless and force the powerful to listen. The bond with the king hummed warmly in her chest, a steady current of love and redemption that gave her the courage to raise the glowing cloth from the ritual high, for all to see, its script pulsing softly like living truth under the morning light. With a voice that rang clear and resonant, carrying the poetic depth of emotions long held in silence, Solana began to read the prophecies aloud for the first time, her words flowing like a river of light that cut through the court's stunned silence. "These are not mere stains or tricks of the eye, my lords and ladies," she declared, her tone steady yet laced with the empowering strength of one who had walked through fire and emerged radiant. "My blood has written them for years, warnings of thefts at the treasury, raids at the borders, and now the full conspiracy that threatens the heart of this kingdom. Lord Varen and those who stand with him have plotted to undermine the king with false alliances and poisoned whispers, turning brother against brother and silencing any Omega who dares to rise. But hear the truth as my blood has revealed it, the exact names, the hidden meetings, the dawn strike they planned even as we stand here." The court gasped collectively as she continued reading each line with precise emotional clarity, the glowing script illuminating the hall like a sacred decree, exposing every detail of the betrayal in language so beautiful and undeniable that even the most skeptical nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The king stepped forward, his deep voice joining hers in powerful support, his golden eyes sweeping the assembly with commanding presence that silenced the rising murmurs. "What you hear is no fabrication," he proclaimed, the words rich with the regret he had confessed to her in quiet moments, now transformed into public redemption. "I once rejected this woman in this very hall, blinded by pride and false ideals of perfection. I called her unworthy, because I failed to see the sacred power in her blood, the gift that has saved us time and again while I clung to outdated strength. Today I stand beside her not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a man who has learned that true power comes from lifting the voiceless from invisible to essential. Solana's prophecies are the voice this kingdom has needed, and I will defend them with my life for. She has shown me the path to a realm where chosen family matters more than bloodlines, where every Omega finds strength instead of silence. His emotional dialogue wove seamlessly with hers, creating a united front that resonated through the hall, the bond between them visible in the way his hand found hers openly before the court, a gesture of earned love that made several nobles lower their gazes in discomfort. Solana felt her heart swell with inner triumph, the once oppressed girl now speaking with a voice that echoed off the ancient walls, changing everything in this single public confrontation. She turned to the doubters, her eyes meeting Lord Varen's directly, her words flowing with poetic empowerment that left no room for denial. You called me fragile, unworthy, a stain upon the court, yet my blood has protected the treasury, saved villages at the borders, and now exposes your betrayal before it can take root. This is the power of the powerless, the voice of the voiceless rising to demand justice. No longer will Omegas hide in shadows, no longer will we be cast aside for nosebleeds or differences that carry the very future of our realm. I stand here transformed by the ritual of blood and light, and I call upon this court to choose redemption over rebellion, to embrace the change that will make us stronger together. The emotional weight of her speech hung in the air like a sacred vow, silencing the last whispers of opposition as many in the crowd nodded slowly, their expressions shifting from doubt to quiet awe. The king squeezed her hand gently, his gaze filled with pride and love as he added softly, for her ears yet loud enough for the hall to hear, you have given us all a new dawn, Solana, and I am yours to walk it with you every step. Yet even as the court's murmurs turned to tentative applause and the traitors shifted uneasily under the weight of exposed truth, the distant sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the outer corridors, followed by urgent voices of incoming messengers carrying reports of border clans mobilizing in response to the failed plot, a new threat rising just as the confrontation seemed to seal their victory. In the sunlit grandeur of the throne hall, where the echoes of her public confrontation still lingered like a sacred vow, the court fell into a hushed awe as attendants brought forth the ancient crown of the realm, a circlet of gleaming silver, woven with threads of crimson that shimmered like living blood under the stained glass light. Solana stood tall at the center, her white gown now flowing around her like a river of destiny, the power of the ritual fully awakened within her veins, making her presence radiate with quiet, unshakable authority. Aether stepped forward, his golden eyes filled with pride and deep love as he lifted the crown with reverent hands, placing it gently upon her head, the metal cool, yet warm with the weight of legacy. In that cinematic moment, the hall erupted in a wave of applause and cheers, the chandeliers sparkling brighter as if the palace itself celebrated the rise of a queen who had emerged from shadows to claim her throne. Her inner thoughts swelled with profound reflection on the long journey that had brought her here. From the lower halls where she scrubbed floors on her knees, hiding nosebleeds in fear, to this sunlit dais where her blood had written the prophecies that exposed betrayal and demanded justice. She had once believed herself invisible, unworthy, a fragile Omega cast aside in this very room, yet now crowned and empowered, she felt the transformation complete, the voice of the voiceless finally heard, and the powerless rising to reshape the world with compassion and truth. The king took her hand, his touch steady and warm, sending the bond humming between them like a melody of redemption earned through every slow burn moment of vulnerability and trust. He turned to the assembled court, his deep voice carrying across the hall with commanding yet humble resonance. Today we crown Queen Solana, not as a symbol of old bloodlines, but as the living embodiment of change she has brought us. Her gift, her courage, and her unyielding heart have saved this kingdom more times than pride allowed me to admit. I stand beside her as partner, and husband, having learned through my own grave mistake that true strength lies in lifting those once silenced. Let her first decrees mark the dawn of a new era, where no Omega lives in fear, where chosen family binds us stronger than any ancient lineage. Solana felt her heart lift with empowering certainty as she stepped forward addressing the court. With a voice that flowed like poetry born of pain and triumph. As your queen, I decree the immediate rewriting of the laws that have oppressed Omegas for generations. No longer will nosebleeds or any natural differences mark us as fragile or unworthy. From this day forward, all Omegas shall have equal voice and counsel, equal protection under the throne, and the right to pursue their hidden gifts without shame or punishment. The lower halls will become sanctuaries of learning, where those once invisible can study and share their talents freely. The bond between alphas and omegas will be honored not as dominance, but as mutual respect and love earned through understanding. These changes will protect the powerless, give voice to the voiceless, and build a kingdom where every citizen stands tall regardless of status. The court responded with a mix of stunned silence and growing cheers as scribes hurried to record. Her words, the cinematic scenes unfolding with vivid beauty, banners unfurling from the rafters in. Colors of unity and hope, servants and nobles alike stepping forward to offer congratulations, some with tears of relief, others with quiet nods of acceptance. The king watched her with unwavering pride, his golden eyes reflecting the love that had grown from regret to devotion, his hand never leaving hers as he murmured softly for her ears alone. You are magnificent, Solana, the queen this realm has waited for. Your journey from the shadows has illuminated us all, and I am honored to walk beside you, changing laws and hearts together. She turned to him, her inner reflection deepening with gratitude and strength, the once broken girl. Now queen, feeling the full weight of her transformation, empowering her to lead with compassion and wisdom.
Right,
in the following hours, they worked side by side in the royal chambers, reviewing ancient scrolls and drafting new protections for Omegas, establishing academies in the lower halls where Lila and others like her could teach and learn freely. Cinematic imagery filled the palace as celebrations spilled into the gardens, lanterns lit early in honor of the new decrees, music drifting through the air while Solana walked among the people, her presence inspiring whispers of hope from those who had lived unseen for too long. She reflected on every step, the childhood trauma, the rejection, the ritual under moonlight, all converging into this moment where her blood's prophecies had not only saved lives but rewritten the very foundations of justice. The bond between her and the king deepened further in these shared acts of governance, his pride.
What is
evident in every glance, his love a steady anchor that allowed her to embrace her role fully. Yet as the sun began its slow descent and the court prepared for evening feasts, a quiet messenger arrived at the chamber doors bearing urgent news from the border clans, the remnants of Lord Varens. Failed allies stirring once more with demands that tested the new laws before they could fully take root. In the weeks that followed her coronation, the palace transformed into a living sanctuary of voices, where the once dim lower halls now echoed with laughter and learning as Solana walked through the newly established academy, her white queenly robes flowing like a river of hope around her. Sunlight poured through freshly opened windows, illuminating long tables where Omegas from every corner of the kingdom gathered, their eyes bright with the wonder of finally being seen and heard. She had decreed the space a haven for hidden gifts where nosebleeds and differences once called weaknesses became celebrated paths to prophecy and wisdom. Lila stood at the center of one classroom, her hands guiding a group of young women as they practiced reading ancient scripts on white cloths, their own blood prophecies beginning to glow softly under careful instruction. Solana paused in the doorway, her inner thoughts swelling with a profound sense of complete transformation. The girl who had once hidden in tiny chambers scrubbing floors in fear now stood as queen and leader, watching chosen family bloom where bloodlines had once divided them. The empowering journey from invisible to powerful felt fully realized in these halls where every Smile and every shared story healed the scars of silence
I
she had
can't
carried for
stay
so long.
here.
The king joined her there, his tall frame moving with quiet grace
There
through the
has
academy
to be a
corridors.
way
His
out.
golden eyes softening every time they met hers, the
Please
slow burn
let me
love between them
find it.
deepening into a tender partnership forged through redemption and mutual respect. He had spent the morning personally overseeing the delivery of scrolls and supplies, his powerful hands helping to arrange shelves with a humility that still surprised her after the arrogance of his past. In a quiet alcove away from the students, he drew her close, his voice low and rich with emotion as he
I am innocent.
spoke words of full redemption that
Silence!
wrapped around her heart
I will
like
have
healing
order.
light. Solana, my queen, I stand here redeemed not by
Please,
title, but by the love and trust you
Enough.
have given me despite
She
the
is under
mistake
my
that once shattered
protection.
us. Watching you lead these women, seeing the hope in their eyes
pain
reminds
is
me daily of the
endless.
blindness I carried and the strength I now cherish in you.
Cannot bear
You have changed me
it.
from a ruler who demanded perfection to a partner who lifts every voice, and
Help
I
me.
vow with every breath to protect this sanctuary and the family we are building together.
I have to
His hand
find
rested
you.
gently on hers, the bond humming warmly between them, a cinematic moment
Where
of tenderness.
are you?
In the sunlit space where their slow burn romance had earned its
Answer
place through
me!
vulnerability and shared purpose. She leaned into him, her voice soft, yet filled with the poetic depth of her inner
I have
triumph.
to get out of
My
here.
king, your redemption has given me the courage to build this academy where omegas like Lila and so
They're coming.
many
for
others
me.
can discover their gifts without fear. From the shadows where I once believed myself unworthy, I now see a chosen family rising
You
stronger
dare
than any
defy the
bloodline
crown.
ever could.
Your
Together we have
crown
rewritten the
is a
laws, but it is in
lie.
these halls that the real
Then
change
you
lives,
will
where
rot
every
in the dungeon.
silenced heart finds its
I
voice,
won't
and every
be
fragile drop of
silenced.
blood becomes prophecy.
Gods!
They walked hand in
Take
hand
her!
through the academy corridors, pausing to speak with the women
I
who
can't
shared
stay here.
stories of their own hidden talents, tears flowing freely, as one young Omega described how Solana
I
has
have to see what's
decrees had allowed her to
beyond.
leave a life of servitude and study the ancient
Please,
languages her blood revealed.
Let me through.
Solana listened with deep empathy, her inner thoughts reflecting
I
on the
have to
complete arc
find
of her
you.
journey. From the trauma of childhood warnings and the public
Where
rejection
are
in the
you?
grand hall to this moment of leadership where she empowered
Answer
others to
me!
step into their own light. The academy buzzed with life, classrooms filled with laughter and focused learning gardens outside, where students tended herbs that enhanced their gifts, and a central hall where prophecies were shared openly, turning what was once shame into celebrated wisdom. The king remained at her side, his presence a steady anchor, offering quiet support during emotional exchanges where he admitted to former advisors how his past blindness had nearly cost the kingdom its heart. His redemption shone through in every action, every word of encouragement he gave to the students, proving through deeds that love earned through transformation could heal even the deepest divides. As the afternoon sun cast golden patterns across the stone floors, Solana stood before the assembled academy, addressing the women with a voice that carried the empowering resonance of one who had walked through fire and emerged as queen. You are the voices this kingdom has waited for, she told them, her words flowing with poetic beauty and emotional truth. No longer will we hide our gifts or fear our differences. This sanctuary is yours, a place where chosen family binds us, and where every Omega rises to lead with the power that flows from within. The cheers that followed filled the hall with a warmth that brought tears to her eyes, the cinematic imagery of united women standing tall, a testament to the laws she had changed and the legacy already taking root. The king watched with pride, his hand finding hers again in a tender squeeze that spoke of the deep love they shared, the slow burn connection, now a flame that illuminated their shared future. Yet as the celebrations continued and the academy settled into its rhythm, a quiet messenger approached the queen with news from the outer borders, the clans once tied to the old plots now seeking audience to pledge loyalty, but carrying with them a final challenge to the new decrees that would test the strength of her voice one last time before the realm could truly embrace its bright horizon. In the golden light of a new spring morning, the academy sanctuary stood as a living testament to change its halls alive with the vibrant energy of Omegas who had once lived in the shadows now, thriving openly under the sun that streamed through wide arched windows. Solana walked slowly along the flower-lined paths, her hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. Where the royal air stirred with quiet promise, the child conceived in the warmth of a bond fully healed and strengthened by every step of redemption. Her inner thoughts flowed like a gentle river after a long storm, reflecting on the complete arc of her journey from the cold lower halls where she had scrubbed floors on her knees, hiding every drop of blood in fear, to this bright future where her voice had rewritten the laws of the kingdom and lifted countless others into light. The trauma of childhood warnings, her mother's fearful lessons, the public humiliation in the grand hall, and the noble plots that once hunted her through the corridors all felt distant now, like faded ink on an old cloth, replaced by the empowering truth that she had become the powerful queen who gave voice to the voiceless and turned the powerless into leaders. She paused at the entrance to the Grand Council chamber, where the Equal Council now convened, its members, a perfect blend of alphas, betas, and omegas, seated together around the long oak table there. Faces illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns and the fresh breeze carrying scents of blooming jasmine from the gardens beyond. Lila sat proudly at one end, her voice clear and confident as she presented a new curriculum for young prophets, the other omegas nodding in agreement, while alpha advisors listened with genuine respect, no longer dismissing the gifts that had once been scorned. Solana stepped inside her presence, bringing a warm hush over the room as she took her seat at the head beside Aether, his golden eyes meeting hers with a depth of love and pride that made the bond between them hum like a sacred melody. He reached for her hand under the table, his touch steady and reassuring as he spoke with a voice rich in emotion that filled the chamber. My queen, your vision has made this council what it was always meant to be, a place where every voice holds equal weight, where chosen family binds us stronger than any bloodline ever could. I once rejected the very power that now guides us all, blinded by pride, yet through your courage and the prophecies written in your blood, I have learned the true meaning of redemption. This air you carry will grow up in a world you helped create, one of fairness and hope, where no omega fears silence and every gift is celebrated. Solana felt her heart swell with profound inner triumph, her thoughts painting vivid images of the bright future unfolding before them, the academy expanding into multiple sanctuaries across the kingdom, young women discovering their hidden talents without shame, equal laws protecting the vulnerable, and a realm at peace where political conflicts had dissolved into collaborative strength. She replied softly, yet with resonant power that echoed her empowering transformation. My king, together we have built this legacy, not from force, but from the quiet voices that refuse to stay hidden. Look at this council, this academy, the way omegas now stand as equals. It is the proof that the powerless can rise and change everything. Our child will inherit a world where blood prophecies are honored as sacred gifts, and where love is earned through understanding and mutual respect. The emotional dialogue wove between them, tender and cinematic, the sunlight catching the silver threads in her gown as council members added their own stories of lives transformed by the new decrees, tears of gratitude flowing freely in the room. Later, as the council session ended and the academy buzzed with afternoon classes, Solana and the king walked hand in hand through the blooming gardens where roses and lavender swayed in the gentle breeze, their footsteps light on the stone paths that once felt like paths of exile. The air kicked softly within her, a reminder of the prophecy her blood had written on the night of the ritual, foretelling a child who would carry both strength and compassion, guiding the kingdom into an even brighter era. She paused by a fountain, watching the water sparkle like diamonds, her inner thoughts overflowing with gratitude and quiet joy, the once invisible girl, now queen mother and world changer, feeling the full weight of her legacy settling warmly around her like a crown of starlight. The king drew her close, his arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders, his deep voice murmuring words of eternal devotion. Solana, you have given me more than redemption. You have given me a future I never dared dream of. Family, a kingdom united, and a love that grows stronger with every dawn. Our child will know your story, the way you rose from silence to power, and it will inspire generations to come. She leaned into him, her voice soft with poetic emotion, as she replied, "This is our bright future, my love, the academy, thriving, the council equal, and our heir born under prophecy, to carry the light forward. From the shadows where I once believed myself unworthy, I now see endless possibility, and I am grateful beyond words that your heart chose to walk beside mine." The garden seemed to bloom brighter, around them butterflies dancing on the air, birds singing in the trees as the palace beyond echoed with the sounds of celebration and learning, a realm transformed by the power of one woman's blood and unyielding spirit. Solana closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of spring and the promise of tomorrow, her heart full with the empowering knowledge that her journey had not only changed her own life but had opened doors for every silenced soul, ensuring that no Omega would ever feel invisible again. The future stretched before them, golden and hopeful, a legacy of chosen family equality, and voices finally heard echoing through the ages. Her story has come to an end, but our journey together continues. If you found this story inspiring and meaningful, please like the video to support me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next empowering stories. And if you have any thoughts about the characters, her journey, or want to share your own story, please comment below. I really look forward to reading and chatting with you.